Hi everybody. This is the second case making video. And after I got the one done yesterday, I realized that there were a few things that I had neglected to cover prior to adhering the cloth to the case. So I want to quickly run through them. The first one is I did find a book without the spine lining. So this is what the book looks like before you put the spine lining on. So you can see, as I said, it's been fan bound, sawn 6 troughs, six grooves, and then a couple of plies of sewing cord PV8 in there, and that's enough to hold things together relatively solidly, although it's still a perfect binding, so you know that's how these things go. So there's that, and then here is, if I can get a hold of it, the spine strip, or the hinge strip. Doesn't have to be super wide, does have to be a little bit shorter than the height of the text block. Okay, so that's, and then once, actually, before that goes on, you're going to tip your end paper sections along the spine edge. So I actually like to tip the folio. So I would run a tip along here with a sheet of waste paper, and then I like to do it this way, knock everything up to the head, and then just slide it forward until it aligns with either the foredge or the spine. And then press it down, do the other side, give it a nip in the press. Then this goes on, and then the text block's done. Okay, so I did want to just show you that quickly. The other thing I wanted to address shortly is the proportionality of the thickness of the boards to the final product. There can be a tendency to go overly thick with boards, and my preference, my taught preference, and actually I think probably I would have preferred it anyway, is I would rather go narrower than wider, or thinner rather than thicker. Obviously, beyond a certain point, then you're going to run into problems either way. But boards that are too thick relative to the proportions of the text block can feel clumsy, or I don't want to say unprofessional, but they just, you know, it's not what you're looking for. Again, thinner boards can give an air of elegance to a piece, so keep that in mind. And then the other proportion thing is, how big do you make the squares? How far do you design the boards to extend beyond the text block? Again, if they're too big, they tend to look, again, not as polished as they should be. A good rule of thumb, well, a rule of thumb, I don't know whether you'll think it's good or not, but the one that I and a lot of my colleagues were taught is that a good place to start is to allow about the same distance that the board projects to be roughly equivalent to the thickness of the board. So again, it's a place to start. And if you choose to use it, you probably won't go too wrong. Obviously, bigger book's going to get heavier boards, bigger squares, smaller book, the opposite. So let me see, what else was I going to say? Squares. Yes. Now, with regards to the raw case, this is one of my raw cases, and you'll notice that I left the hinge strip taller, the hinge strip and the spine strip taller than the boards. That way, if I make it flush at the top, I can cut it afterwards, and I don't have to worry about, did I make it too short to start with? Is it gonna, you know, So again, you can deal with that at this stage with your old scissors. Give it a snip and you're done. All right. So there's your raw case. Now, last thing before we get into the, the fun stuff. So how do you know if this thing is square? Well, the one thing you know is that you've made your 3 pricks on either side, and if it shifts, it's going to look like this. All right, can you see how? I don't know if you can see the difference there. I'm kind of looking at the top of my phone as I do this. All right, but it's wider here because you can see where the prick is. And actually, never mind. Another thing that you want to do at this point, is if you, let me take the case I just did. This is a good case. So if I stand up my case like this, whether it's going to be on a round back book or not is immaterial, and I match up the 4 edges of the boards so everything looks good. And if I squeeze it together there, I'll get this. Now this is a hair off. You can see that it's not perfect. All right. The other side is pretty good. All right. So right there. Now this one is probably within the margin of error. The top is good. So this is how you tell if your case. This is a second way to tell if your case is okay to take to the next level. This one's not. See that? See how crooked that is? All right. But the nice thing is I can pull this hinge strip and spine off and cut another pair, and then I can reuse the boards. So that's what I wanted to talk about yesterday and did not. So you're getting that today. All right, now covering. Was I going to use this case? Yes, I was. All right, so you can either cut your boards or cut your cover material so it's a little bit big, or you can cut it exactly to what you think are going to be the final turn-ins. You generally will run into more problems that way. I prefer to try and get at least 2 sides pretty much the way I want them, and then I can trim the other 2 once I'm done. You could also, although it's not the easiest thing to do, you could also, after you get the cloth adhered to the outside of the case, you could then measure and cut, so that your turn-ins are okay. If you've glued out the covering material, that's going to make it a little awkward. So anyway, and one last thing before we get going, 2 last things before we get going. I prefer to glue up the covering material rather than the case. You can glue up the case. If you're working with paper, you're going to run into the possibility that it's going to bubble up and give you problems, because as it hits, even though the glue is relatively low in moisture, there's still moisture in there. When the paper hits it, it's going to grow. Going to grow across the grain, and you run the serious possibility of getting bubbles in there that are going to give you a hard time. So on a big piece of material, obviously, if you're working with PVA, you're going to have trouble brushing it out in time. I know that there are people who use rollers, either foam or probably paint roller, like a standard paint roller. But I think the foam rollers are preferred. And if you get a wide enough one, you can cover a lot of territory, again, in a short enough period of time that everything will work okay. All right, we have company here. We'll see how this goes. The other thing before I get started, because I'm working under the camera, I have to do everything here. If I were working if I were doing these cases on a regular basis, kind of under normal circumstances, I would have one place on the bench where I glue the material. I would have one place on the bench which is my dirty spot, and I would have one place on my bench which is my clean spot. The dirty spot is for when you have to put the case face up, and so the turn-ins are going to lay on whatever you're working on. And so if you pick that up and then turn the case over and put it down, you're going to have problems because you're going to get crap on the outside. You do not want to do that. So you really want to have, you know, a clean area on the bench and a dirty area on the bench. A nice workaround that I have used for a long time is a piece of Mylar for my dirty area. And what you're going to see is I'm going to glue out on this piece of newsprint. I'm going to take it off. I'm going to do my first stage on the Mylar, and then I'm going to pick the case up, move the Mylar, and then I can come back right here. So that's the drill. Mort is going to get his tail glued if he's not real careful here. All right. So I got my big brush. I just made fresh glue. I have my knife for picking off goomers. I have my scissors. I'm going to talk about corners as we go. And here we go. So I'm going to charge up my brush, wipe off the outside lightly, because this is going to take a fair amount of adhesive. All right. Hold it down with 2 fingers. Everybody see? 2 fingers. I like to use these 2. All right. Here we go. Move. This way your material doesn't shift and you lessen the chances of getting glue on the good side. It doesn't go all completely away. God knows I've made my share of problems. Then what I like to do is, if you look at it at a low angle so the light rakes across it, you can see where there are any things that are going to lay under the cloth and make you look really bad, to the point where you probably will have to get rid of that one. All right, so we're good to go. Here's my case. Normally I would have it turned around with a square corner at the top, but today I'm going to do this. So I'm basically eyeballing approximately 5/8 of an inch at the foredge and what's going to be the head, or what's going to be the tail. All right, so I've put the case down onto the material. I am going to now pick it up, get rid of this, lay this down. Where's my marks? I made some marks, but I can't see them. All right, this is not too bad. Everybody see? All right, I'm gonna hold this up on my arm. If you're wearing a watch, take it off. Heel of the hand, you don't need to aggressively work with a folder here. Take your thumb, work it down next to the inside, the spine edge of the board. There's my bone folder. I don't have my bone folder. Take my little bone folder, which won't be quite as good. Trick this back up. I just washed it too, so it should be here. Yeah, it probably is. All right, so now I'm working the cloth firmly against the spine edge of the board. Everybody good? Okay. I'm going to take my thumb, I'm going to work it down across the spine over to the other side. It's really important to get the cloth tightly over the spine edge of the boards, otherwise it's going to look a little uncool. You good? Yeah. Again, just work it gently ahead. Aha, see that? Uh-oh. Okay. I can make that go away, I think. All right. We'll see what happens. Okay, everybody see what's going on there? So now I'm going to pull this off. There goes my dirty area. Here's my clean area. All right. Normally I would hang this off the edge of the bench to cut the corners, but I'm going to do this instead. Another thing that I've seen a lot of in the videos recently are people who have or make little guides for corner cutting, which is fine, but where's my corner? There's my corner. At some point, you should be able to just do it. You want to cut a little over the thickness of the board away from the corner. Board and a half, say. Okay? And if you're going to err either way, err towards too wide. I mean, it's not as elegant, but it's better to have the corner covered than to have a little hole. God knows we've all made our little holes there. All right, now because of the way this thing is structured, you want to cut 2 darts. I generally do the center first, and then got to pull it really, really firmly against the edge of the board so you don't get any buckles or bubbles or anything. Ditto this side. Okay. Let's see how we're doing. Okay, now this is dried out. So what I'm going to do now is, where should I put my folder? Not the little one, but there it is. I am actually going to grab another piece of newsprint and, oops, sorry, I keep hitting this with my head. I should also use a smaller brush, but my smaller brush is elsewhere. Even though it sounds a little grotesque, you can also reactivate the glue with moisture. And the easiest moisture is saliva. So just saying. I've done that many times. Dart. You want the darts to be outside, you know, of the, you don't want them to line up with the spine edge of the board. Spine edge of the board is sacrosanct. All right. Again, work it in. Should have worked that one in first. Okay. And one more piece of newsprint. Okay, my folder was in my back pocket, so that's embarrassing. Good. So now, I'm going to do the 4 edges. You do the head and tail first and the 4 edge after. The reason for that is when you make the corner, the little extra bit of cloth that's there, you want that to be at the 4 edge rather than on the top and the bottom, because it's going to wear if it's on the bottom. If it's on the top, not so much, but gravity has its way of dealing with things. I'm just going to do both of these. Okay. Throw it away. I think I'm going to work towards myself. You can either work towards yourself or away from yourself. So I'm going to take my nail, I'm going to nick it in, do that. Again, firmly over the edge of the board. Again, clean fingers, dirty fingers, and you shouldn't have too much trouble keeping everything nice and neat and tidy. So I'm going to do this. In general, again, I'm used to working off the bench. So now I'm going to flip it over. Not half bad. I'm going to come back here. Here. I'm going to very gently feel for the outside edge of the spine strip, which is under the hinge strip. And I'm going to run my folder along it to help it crease, or to help it over the shoulder break, actually. And then, again, because I'm working in this fashion, you want to use your folder vertically around the edges. Again, it's easier off the bench because then you hold it and you just go. All right, and then you want to take your folder, hold it again, hold the, where's my fingers? There they are. And you can shape the corner. You want to make it nice and symmetrical. You want to try and work that little bit of extra so it's not real obvious. And you want to take the point off of the corner so it just has a nice, it's not round, but it's not pointy either. Okay. And last one. Okay. So there's that. Even though it's still pretty fresh, I'm going to put it on this so you can see a little better. And I can tell where everything's supposed to go. Okay. You can measure it, or you can just go to the narrowest part of the turn-in you can find. And if your eye's pretty good after all those years, you know, some of these guys will be pretty straight. 2 divider pricks. And more. Okay. Straight edge. Knife. All right. Go this way. Don't worry too much, you won't cut through the board so far that it goes through the other side. Unless you're much stronger than I am. Here you are. They kind of disappear sometimes, so you have to find them again. Don't cut into the joint. You will say many bad words and you'll have to remake the case. I generally just cut to my little darts, close to them anyway. Oops, get out of there. When you pull these off, pull them off at a low angle and out. close enough for state work. Actually, no, I want to get this guy in. There we go. Normally I wouldn't do this early, but again, and I'm going to grab a text block. We'll see what we have. Okay. Oops. So you can see there it is. There's a little goomer there. I'm hoping I can get rid of that. All right. So that's how I cover a case for a full binding. Obviously, quarter binding is a little different. The last step then is to case the book in, which I will do probably not immediately, but soon, and then we'll take care of that. And that's pretty much it. If anybody has any questions, comments, complaints, please put them in the comments. I really do appreciate hearing from people, and I appreciate those of you who continue to subscribe and who continue to stick around between long waits between videos. Going to try and be better, but that's how I do it. Pretty straightforward. Thanks to everybody, and I will be back. Stay safe.